Who doesn't like having the whole house to themselves at 17? I did too, until the night I realized someone else was inside the house with me. I was 17, playing video games alone at home. My favorite kind of night. If you relate, hit like and subscribe before this gets darker. My parents had left around 7 for some corporate dinner party downtown, company events that would drag on until midnight or more. I was in the living room, controller in hand, headset half on. The house was mine. That feeling lasted exactly 43 minutes. First, I heard the lock turn, not a key sliding in, not the door opening, just the deadbolt. That heavy metal click you feel in your chest when someone locks you in. Then it turned back, unlocked, then locked again. Slow. My hands went still on the controller. I pulled off the headset and the house was silent except for that sound. A click. I stood up and my legs felt cold. I walked to the front door and looked through the peephole. The porch light was on. The street was empty. No car, no person, no shadow. I opened the door and the night air hit my face. And there was nothing. Just the sound of distant traffic and a dog barking 2 blocks over. I checked the lock. It was solid. Old brass, no loose parts. I turned it myself a few times. It worked fine. I stepped back inside and locked it again. My heartbeat was too loud. I laughed a little, the way you do when you're trying to prove to yourself that you're not scared. Maybe the mechanism was worn. Maybe it was the temperature change. I went back to the couch and sat down, but I didn't put the headset back on. That's when the door slammed upstairs. Not a soft close, a full slam, like someone shoved it with both hands. The sound punched through the house, and I felt it in my ribs. I stood up without thinking. My legs moved before my brain caught up. I was halfway to the stairs before I stopped. My hands were shaking. I clenched them into fists and pressed them against my jeans. I waited, listened. The air felt heavier now. I called out, asked if anyone was there. My voice sounded small and stupid. No answer. Just the hum of the fridge in the kitchen. I thought maybe a window was open. Maybe the wind caught a door. But it was October, and we'd sealed everything up weeks ago. Still, I forced myself to believe it. I climbed the stairs. Each step creaked under my weight. The hallway was dark except for the glow of the bathroom nightlight. Every door was closed. I checked my parents' room. Empty. The guest room. Empty. My own room. I stood in the doorway and scanned it. Bed unmade. Clothes on the floor. Laptop charging on my desk. Normal. I pulled the door shut as I left, and the sound it made was soft. Nothing like the slam. I stood there in the hallway and felt my chest tighten. My breath was shallow. I forced myself to go back downstairs. That's when I heard the footsteps. They came from the hallway behind the kitchen. Slow. Measured. The sound of weight shifting from heel to toe. Not the creak of an old house settling. Not pipes or floorboards. Footsteps. Human footsteps. My whole body locked up. My pulse was a hammer in my ears. I turned toward the kitchen and the footsteps stopped. Silence again. Thick and suffocating. I couldn't move. My muscles were wire tight and my hands were cold, and my throat had closed up completely. I waited. 10 seconds, 20. Then I forced myself forward. I walked into the kitchen and turned on every light. The hallway beyond it was empty. I checked the basement door, locked from the inside. I checked the back door, locked. I stood there under the fluorescent light and tried to breathe, tried to think, tried to convince myself I was imagining things. But my body knew. My body was screaming. The TV turned on. I spun around. The living room TV, the one I'd been playing on, was on. No image, just static, loud, crackling static. I hadn't touched the remote. It was still on the couch. I walked over and grabbed it, my thumb fumbling for the power button. The screen went black. The silence rushed back in. My hands were trembling so badly, I almost dropped the remote. I set it down carefully, like it might explode. Then the lights went out. Not all of them, just the living room and the hallway upstairs. The kitchen light stayed on, casting a weak glow into the dark. My chest was so tight, I thought I'd pass out. I grabbed my phone from my pocket and turned on the flashlight. The beam shook as I moved. I thought about the breaker box. It was in the basement, but the basement door was behind me now, and I couldn't make myself turn around. That's when I heard them running. Fast footsteps, upstairs, crossing from one side of the house to the other. I heard them hit the floor above my head, one after another, heavy and quick. My whole body went cold. I backed up against the kitchen counter, and my phone almost slipped out of my hand. The running stopped. Then a door slammed again. Then another. Then another. 3 slams in a row, each one louder than the last. My breath was ragged. I couldn't think. I couldn't move. I ran. I didn't plan it. My body just moved. I bolted for the front door, grabbed the handle, and pulled. It didn't open. I yanked harder. Nothing. I looked down, and the deadbolt was locked. I unlocked it, turned the handle again, and pulled. Still nothing. It was like someone was holding it from the outside. I threw my weight against it, and pain shot through my shoulder. My hands were slick with sweat. I was choking on my own breath. I turned and ran for the back door, through the kitchen, down the hallway. I grabbed the knob and twisted, and it opened. Cold air poured in, and I almost fell outside. But then I stopped. I stopped because I heard it. Right behind me. Breathing. Slow. Wet. Close. I slammed the door shut and locked it. My whole body was shaking. I pressed my back against the door and slid down until I was sitting on the floor. My heartbeat was so loud, I thought it would burst. I sat there, knees pulled to my chest, phone flashlight still on, and I listened. The house was quiet again, but it wasn't empty. I could feel it. Something was inside. Someone was inside. I heard scratching. It started soft, then grew louder. Fingernails on wood. It was coming from the other side of the basement door. Slow, deliberate scratching, like someone testing the surface. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. The scratching stopped. The silence was worse. Then I saw it. The kitchen drawer was open. I hadn't opened it. It was the junk drawer, the one we never used. I stood up slowly, legs weak, and walked over. My flashlight beam cut through the dark. Inside the drawer, everything was shifted. The pens, the rubber bands, the old batteries, all pushed to one side, like someone had been looking for something. I stepped back and my foot hit something on the floor. I looked down. Muddy footprints, small, narrow prints leading from the back door to the hallway. But I just locked that door, and the prints weren't mine. They were too small. My stomach dropped. I followed them with the flashlight. They led to the hallway, then the living room. Then they stopped in front of the couch. I spun around. The couch was wrong. It had been moved, just a few inches, but enough to see the carpet indentation where it used to be. I backed away. My breath was sharp and fast. The room felt smaller. The air felt thicker. My skin was crawling. Someone had been here. Someone was still here. I heard footsteps again, above me. Slow this time, moving toward the stairs. My chest was on fire. I couldn't breathe. I ran to the front door again, and this time it opened. I don't know why. I didn't care. I stumbled onto the porch, and the cold air that hit me like a slap. I turned back and looked at the open door, the dark hallway beyond it. I pulled out my phone and called for help. I sat on the curb and waited. My whole body was vibrating. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I kept my eyes on the door. It stayed open. Nothing came out. When the police arrived, I told them everything. They went inside with flashlights and radios. I waited outside. They were in there for 20 minutes. When they came out, they said the house was empty. No signs of forced entry. No one inside. They checked every room, every closet, the basement, the attic, nothing. But I saw their faces. They found something. One of them asked me if anyone else had a key. I said no, just my parents. He nodded slowly, and then he told me. The door to the upstairs bathroom, the one at the end of the hall. It was locked from the inside. They had to force it open. There was no one inside, but the window was closed. Locked. No way in. No way out. I went back inside with them. They walked me through the house. That's when I saw it on the kitchen counter. A key ring. Old, rusted, with 3 keys I didn't recognize. I asked the officers if they'd brought it in. They said no. They asked if it was mine. I said no. One of them bagged it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with every light on until my parents came home. I didn't tell them everything. I didn't know how. The next day, I checked my phone. I was scrolling through my photos and I saw a video I didn't remember recording. I opened it. My hands went numb. It was my room, filmed from the corner near my desk. The angle was low, like someone had set the phone down. The video was dark, but I could see my bed, my closed door, and then the door opened. A figure stepped in, hooded, slow. They walked to my desk, picked something up. The camera caught their hand. They were holding the keyring, the same rusted keyring the police had bagged. The figure turned and looked directly at the camera for 3 seconds. Then the video ended. I showed the police. They said the metadata showed it was recorded at 9:47 p.m., right when I heard the footsteps upstairs. They asked again if anyone else had been in the house. I said no. They kept the phone for evidence. They never found anything. No prints on the keyring. No matches in any database. No explanation. They told me it was probably a prank. Someone I knew, but I didn't know anyone who would do that. And I couldn't explain the locked bathroom, or the video, or the footsteps. I moved out 2 months later, went to stay with my uncle across town until I left for college. My parents still live in that house. They say nothing's happened since, but I don't believe them. Because sometimes, late at night, my mom calls me. She doesn't say much, just asks if I'm okay, if I'm sleeping, and I can hear it in her voice. That same tightness I felt that night, that same fear she won't name. I don't ask what she's heard. I don't want to know, because I already know. Some nights you hear the lock turn, and when you check, no one's there. But you feel it, in your chest, in your throat, in the way your hands won't stop shaking. Someone was there. Someone is always there. You just can't see them until they want you to. If you felt that tension, like and subscribe. And if you've got your own home alone horror story, leave it in the comments. They're never as rare as people think.
I saw the lights on from the sidewalk. My apartment, 3rd floor, every single window glowing warm yellow against the gray evening sky. My chest tightened immediately. I turned everything off before leaving that morning. I was absolutely sure. I remembered flicking the switch in the bedroom, then the living room, checking twice because I always check twice. But there they were, all of them, on. I'm 32. I live alone in a small 1-bedroom on the east side. It's the kind of building where you hear your neighbors through the walls, where the hallway always smells like someone else's dinner. I've been there for 2 years, never had a problem, never felt unsafe. Same routine, same keys, same locks. I stood there on the sidewalk for maybe 3 minutes, just staring up. The street was quiet, everything normal. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe I hadn't turned them off. Maybe I'd been distracted thinking about the meeting I had later. That happens. People forget things. But my hands were shaking when I pulled out my phone. I called my friend Marcus, told him what I was seeing. He laughed, not unkindly, and said, "I probably just forgot." I told him I didn't forget. He said he'd stay on the line while I went up to check. I appreciated that. I didn't want to go up alone, even with him just listening through the speaker. The building door opened normally, no signs of forced entry. The hallway was empty, fluorescent lights buzzing like they always do. I climbed the stairs slowly, my footsteps echoing too loud. Marcus was talking, trying to keep things light, saying something about how he'd left his stove on once for an entire weekend. I wasn't really listening. My heart was hammering against my ribs. When I reached my door, I stopped. Put my hand on the knob. It was locked, completely normal. I unlocked it with my key, pushed it open slowly, and stepped inside. Everything looked fine. The living room was exactly as I'd left it. The kitchen was clean. The bedroom door was open, bed made, nothing disturbed. All the lights were on, bright and ordinary. No broken windows, no objects moved, no signs anyone had been there. I walked through each room with Marcus still on the phone, checking closets, looking under the bed like a child. Nothing. Marcus told me I must have just forgotten. I stood in the middle of my living room, looking around, and I almost believed him. Almost. But my throat was still dry, my shoulders were still tense. Something felt wrong in a way I couldn't name. The air felt different. Thicker, maybe. Or maybe I was just being paranoid. I thanked Marcus and hung up. I convinced myself he was right. I'd been distracted that morning. I'd simply forgotten to turn off the lights. It was the only logical explanation. I made dinner. I watched something on my laptop. I went to bed. But I kept waking up during the night, listening to the sounds of the building settling, the distant hum of traffic. My body wouldn't relax. 3 weeks passed. I'd almost forgotten about it. Life returned to normal. Work, home, work, home. I started leaving one lamp on when I left, just in case. Just so I wouldn't have that moment of panic again if I saw light in the windows. Then it happened again. I came home on a Tuesday. It was raining, one of those cold November drizzles that soaks through everything. I was tired, looking forward to getting out of my wet jacket and making coffee. I looked up at my building from across the street, waiting for the traffic light. Every light was on again, but I'd left only the living room lamp on, I was sure. I'd checked 3 times before leaving, specifically because of what happened before. One lamp, that was it. Now every room was lit up like I was throwing a party. My stomach dropped. This time I didn't hesitate. I called the authorities. They arrived within 20 minutes. 2 officers, both polite and professional. I explained what I'd seen, what had happened before. They asked if I'd given anyone a key. I hadn't. They asked if I had problems with anyone, a former partner, anyone who might want to mess with me. I said no. My life was boring. I barely talked to anyone except co-workers and Marcus. They went up with me. They checked every inch of the apartment with flashlights, even though all the lights were already on. They looked in closets, behind furniture, inside cabinets. They checked the windows, the locks, the fire escape. No signs of forced entry. No evidence anyone had been inside. One of the officers asked me if I was sure I'd only left one light on. Her voice was gentle but skeptical. I told her yes, I was absolutely sure. She exchanged a glance with her partner. They told me to call if anything else happened, to consider changing my locks, to maybe set up a camera. After they left, I stood in my apartment alone. Everything was silent except for the rain tapping against the windows. Everything looked normal, untouched. But something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones, in the tension that wouldn't leave my shoulders. That's when I noticed the floor. The hardwood near the entrance was wet. Not just a little damp from my shoes. Actually, wet. Like someone had tracked in rain. But the authorities had worn protective covers over their shoes. Standard procedure. They wouldn't have made puddles. I knelt down, my knees cracking in the silence. There were faint but unmistakable footprints. Wet, leading from the door to the hallway, to the bedroom. They were larger than mine. Barefoot, maybe. Or socks. The edges were blurred but visible in the right light. My hands started trembling as I followed them with my eyes. They led to the bedroom and stopped. Just stopped. Like whoever made them had simply evaporated. My pulse was in my throat now. My mouth was completely dry. I I stood up slowly, every muscle in my body rigid. I should have called the authorities back. I should have left. But I couldn't move. I was locked in place, staring at those footprints, trying to make them make sense. That's when I heard it. A dry clicking sound coming from the bedroom. Soft, rhythmic, like someone flicking ash from a cigarette into a glass tray. The exact sound my father used to make when he smoked on the porch years ago. I don't smoke. I've never smoked. There's no ashtray in my apartment. The sound stopped. Silence rushed back in, heavier than before. I couldn't breathe, couldn't swallow. My feet were rooted to the floor. Then the smell hit me. Strong, unmistakable. Cigarette smoke, fresh, recently extinguished. The acrid, bitter smell filled the apartment, seeping into my nose, my throat. It was suffocating. I forced myself to move. One step, then another. I walked toward the bedroom, my legs shaking so badly I thought I might fall. The door was open. The room was lit. Empty. Completely empty. But the smell was stronger here. Overwhelming. My eyes started watering. I checked the window. Locked. I checked the closet. Empty. I checked under the bed. Nothing. But the smell wouldn't go away. It clung to everything. And the floor near the bed was wet too. A small dark spot on the rug, like someone had been standing there. Dripping. I backed out of the room. I grabbed my jacket, my keys, my phone. I left. I didn't close the door gently. I slammed it and ran down the stairs, my footsteps echoing violently in the stairwell. I burst out onto the street, into the rain, and I stood there gasping for air like I'd been drowning. I called Marcus. I told him everything. He said I should stay at his place. I did. I stayed there for 3 days. When I finally went back, the apartment was normal again. Dry. No smell. No footprints. Nothing. But I know what I saw. What I smelled. The wet floor doesn't lie. The smell doesn't lie. Someone was in there. Someone who knew I'd be gone. Someone who turned on every light, who stood in my bedroom, who smoked a cigarette and watched the rain and waited. The authorities never found anything. No fingerprints, no evidence of forced entry or tampering with the locks. They suggested I might be stressed, overworked, imagining things. One officer gently mentioned carbon monoxide, suggested I get a detector. I did. It's never gone off. I still live there. I can't afford to move. But I don't sleep well anymore. I installed 3 cameras. I checked them obsessively on my phone throughout the day. They've never caught anything. Just empty rooms. Normal rooms. But sometimes, late at night, I'll wake up and smell it. Just for a second. That bitter cigarette smoke. And I'll lie there in the dark, muscles locked, barely breathing, listening for that dry clicking sound. Waiting for the lights to turn on by themselves. Waiting to see wet footprints appear on the floor that lead nowhere. My body still thinks someone is here, even when I can't see them, even when there's no evidence. My heart still races when I turn the key in the lock. My hands still shake when I check the windows before bed. Because somewhere in some part of me I can't reason with, I know the truth. Someone was here. Someone who leaves no trace. Someone who knows when I leave and when I come home. Someone who stands in my bedroom while I'm gone and smokes and watches the rain through my windows. And the worst part, the part that keeps me awake, that makes my throat close up every time I think about it, is this. They didn't take anything. They didn't break anything. They didn't leave a message or a threat. They just wanted me to know they could get in whenever they wanted, and they still can.
I bought the house. In October, it was listed at half the market price. The realtor said the previous owner moved out suddenly. She didn't say why. I didn't ask. The place was old, but solid. 3 bedrooms, wood floors, a small backyard. I'm not superstitious. I grew up fixing things. I figured anything wrong with the house, I could handle it myself. The first week was normal. I unpacked boxers. I set up the furniture. The house settled at night like old houses do. Creaks in the floorboards. Wind pushing against the windows. Nothing unusual. I slept fine. On the 8th night, I woke up at midnight. I remember checking my phone. Exactly midnight. That's when I heard the footsteps. They were slow, deliberate, coming from the hallway outside my bedroom. I sat up. My chest tightened. I waited. The steps moved toward the kitchen. I got out of bed. I didn't turn on the lights. I stood in the doorway and listened. The footsteps stopped. I walked into the kitchen. Nothing. Empty. The back door was closed. I checked the locks. Everything secure. I went back to bed. I told myself it was the house settling. Old wood expands and contracts. Pipes make noise. It's normal. I believed. The next morning, I checked the house again. Everything was fine, the coffee. I sat at the kitchen table. The sunlight came through the window. It felt normal. I forgot about it by noon. The second night, I woke up at midnight again. Same time exactly. The footsteps started again. Same hallway, same slow rhythm. This time, I didn't wait. I got up immediately. I turned on every light. I walked through the entire house. Nothing. When I got to the kitchen, the back door was open, wide open. I know I locked it before bed. I'm certain there was no sign of forced entry, no scratches on the lock, no broken wood. The door was just open. I stood there for a minute. My hands were cold. I closed it. I locked it again. I checked it 3 times. Then I went back to bed. I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling until sunrise. The next day, I called a locksmith. I had every lock in the... I told my friend Eric about it. He's an engineer. He doesn't believe in anything he can't measure. He laughed. He said, I was getting paranoid. I told him about the footsteps, the open door. He said I probably didn't lock it properly. He said, the footsteps were just the house settling in a pattern. He offered to stay over one night to prove it. Primera, sai, yes. Eric brought a sleeping bag. We stayed up until 11 drinking beer. We talked about work. We watched a game on my laptop. At midnight, we both heard it. The footsteps. We looked at each other. Neither of us said anything. We got up at the same time. We walked into the hallway. The sound was coming from the kitchen. We went in together. Nothing there, but we both heard it. Eric didn't laugh anymore. He checked his watch. He said, maybe there's something wrong with the foundation. Maybe the house shifts at a certain time due to temperature. I didn't answer. We searched the whole house. We opened closets. We looked under furniture. We found nothing. But when we came back to the kitchen, the faucet was running. He shut it off. Eric stared at the sink. He said maybe there's a pressure issue. The next morning, Eric left early. He didn't say much. He texted me later saying he couldn't explain it, but there had to be a logical reason. I didn't respond. That night, I heard the footsteps again. Then the toilet flushed. I was lying in bed. I didn't get up. I just listened. After a few minutes, everything went quiet. I couldn't move. My throat was dry. My heart was pounding in my ears. 3 days later, I was moving a bookshelf in the hallway. It was heavy. I pulled it away from the wall to clean behind it. That's when I saw the door. It was small. Old wood, same color as the wall. There was no handle, just a keyhole. I touched it. The wood was called Primera, pushed on Italiano. It didn't move. I could hear something behind it. A faint sound, like breathing, or maybe air moving through a vent. I didn't open it that night. I pushed the bookshelf back. I went to my room. I locked my door. I didn't sleep. The footsteps came at midnight like always, but this time I heard something else. A creaking sound. like a door hinge. It came from where the hidden door was. I stayed in bed. I didn't move. In the morning, I called Eric again. I told him about the door. He came over that afternoon. We moved the bookshelf together. Eric examined the door. He said it looked original to the house, probably a storage space or access to plumbing. He tried to pry it open. It wouldn't budge. We could still hear the sound behind it. A low hum. Eric said it was probably a draft, but his hands were shaking when he said it. We decided to force it open the next day. We needed better tools. That night, I didn't sleep in the house. I stayed at a motel. When I came back the next morning, the bookshelf was exactly where we left it. We moved it again. Eric brought a crowbar. We broke the lock. The door opened inward. There was a room behind it. Small, no windows. A bed in the corner. The mattress was old, but the sheets looked used. I stepped inside. The air was stale. I put my hand on the bed. It was warm. Not hot, just warm, like someone had been lying there recently. Eric touched it too. He pulled his hand back fast. We looked at each other. We searched the room. There was nothing else. No other door, no vents, no way in or out except the door we came through. Eric said maybe there's a heating pipe under the floor, but I could see his face. He didn't believe it either. We left the room. Eric said we should board it up. We went to a hardware store. We bought wood planks and nails. We sealed the door completely. We nailed the planks across it. Then we pushed the bookshelf back in front. He felt better. Eric stayed for dinner. He left around 9. I locked every door. I went to bed early. I woke up at midnight. The footsteps started, and I heard the door creak open. I got up. I walked to the hallway. The bookshelf was in place. But when I moved it, the planks were gone. The door was open. Not all the way. Just a few inches. There were no nails on the floor. No wood fragments. Nothing. Like we never boarded it up at all. I stood there. My hands were shaking. I could feel my pulse in my neck. I closed the door. I pushed the bookshelf back. I left the house. I stayed at the motel for 3 more days. I thought about selling the house. I thought about just walking away, but I needed to understand. On the 4th day, I went back. I brought a simple camera, one of those cheap security cameras you plug into the wall. I set it up in the kitchen, facing the hallway. I synced it to my phone. Then I left again. I watched the feed from the motel. At midnight, the camera glitched. The image got darker on one side. Not like a shadow. More like the feed itself was corrupted. A black area. It didn't have a clear shape. It just moved across the screen. It went from the hallway toward the sink. The back door opened. The faucet turned on by itself. I could see the water running. Then the glitch moved back toward the hallway. The door closed. The faucet stopped. I watched it happen the next night. Same time. Same sequence. The glitch appeared. It moved. The door opened. Water ran. It returned. Everything went still. I watched for a week. It never changed. Same routine. Same time. Same movements. I tried to rationalize it. I told myself it was a compression error, a problem with the camera. But I couldn't explain why it happened every night at midnight. Why it followed the exact same pattern. I moved out on the 15th day. I took my things. I left the camera running. I still check the feed sometimes. It still happens. Every night. Midnight. The glitch. The door. The water. I put the house up for sale 2 months ago. No one's bought it yet. People ask if there's anything wrong with it. I tell them it's old. I tell them it makes noise. I don't mention the rest. I don't live there anymore. But it continues. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. Leave a like if this made you uncomfortable. If it didn't, say why in the comments. We read every response.